You're useless. Just a burden, a parasite. Get out. I don't need you anymore." Those words hit me like a slap to the face, and they came from my own son. I stood there, frozen, the weight of his words sinking in. For 30 years, I had given him everything: my time, my energy, my love. And this is how he repaid me? By tossing me out like I was nothing more than dead weight? I should have felt angry, but instead, all I felt was numb. Numb and relieved. Relieved that the truth was finally out in the open. My name is Margaret Turner. I spent my life serving others, sacrificing everything for my family, my job, my son. I gave up my dreams, my health, and even my own happiness just to make sure they had everything they needed. But today I stop being the fool. Today I take back my life. No more being walked all over. No more sacrificing my soul for people who will never appreciate me. It's my turn now. If you're ready to see what happens when someone takes control of their life and finally stops being taken for granted, hit that subscribe button and join me on this journey. You won't want to miss what's coming next. For years, I had been the one they called when they needed help. When things went wrong, I was the first person to pick up the pieces. I worked tirelessly, always putting my family, my job, and the people I loved above my own needs. They called me the rock, the one they could lean on. But what no one ever told me was that being the rock meant you were the one who was always expected to hold everyone else up while they crumbled beneath you. I was 60 years old. My hair had begun to gray, and my body felt the weight of decades of hard labor, physically, emotionally, mentally. But I kept pushing, kept working. I had to. I didn't have a choice. My son, Jeremy, had a family now. He had 2 kids, a wife, a house, and a mortgage. And all I had was my job, or at least that's what I thought. It was a Thursday when everything changed. I had just come home from a long day, exhausted and sore, to find Jeremy sitting in the living room, his brow furrowed. He didn't even look up when I walked in. He was busy typing away on his laptop, the glow of the screen casting a cold light on his face. His wife, Sarah, was in the kitchen, fussing over something I didn't care to ask about. The moment I stepped into the door, I could already feel it. There was something in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on, but it was there, thick and suffocating. "Mom," Jeremy said, barely acknowledging me. "We need to talk." I froze. A million thoughts rushed through my head, none of them good. I'd seen that look before. The one that said something was wrong, that something had changed, and I wasn't going to like it. I set down my bag and sat down across from him. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. I already knew the answer. The way he avoided my gaze said everything. Jeremy's fingers paused on the keyboard, and for the first time in what felt like years, he looked me in the eye. But there was no warmth there, no gratitude, just distance. He looked at me like I was a stranger, like I was someone he owed nothing to, no one he needed to care about. "Mom, you know the company's been struggling," he started, his tone detached, almost cold. "I've been talking to Sarah and we've decided, well, it's time for you to move out." My heart stopped. I stared at him, not understanding. "What?" "Yeah, look," he continued, his words growing sharper. "We've been talking about it. It's just, we don't need you here anymore. We've been managing fine without you. And you're getting older. You're not helping out around the house as much. It's becoming, well, a bit much. Sarah's overwhelmed, and with everything going on with the kids, we really need to focus on us now." I could feel the tears pricking at the back of my eyes, but I fought them down. I had been the one to make sacrifices for them, to build a life so they could have the things they wanted, so they could have a better future. And now, just like that, I was being discarded. All the years of hard work, the sleepless nights, the bills I paid without hesitation, the hours spent putting their needs before mine, it didn't matter anymore. "You're asking me to leave?" My voice was barely above a whisper, But it was enough. Enough to make him stop, even if only for a second. But there was no remorse in his eyes, no sign that he cared. He wasn't apologizing, he wasn't explaining. He was just done. "We've already been talking to Sarah's parents," Jeremy went on, his words cutting through me like a blade. "They said it's time for you to move on. You don't have a place here anymore, Mom. It's just not working." I couldn't breathe. The room spun. I had never felt so worthless in my life. It was as if everything I had ever done for them had just been erased. I had given up everything for this family. My career, my friends, my health. And for what? So that one day when I was too old to be useful, they could just toss me aside? I opened my mouth to say something, but the words wouldn't come. What was there to say? There was no point in explaining. I had given everything, and now it meant nothing. I stood up, walking slowly to the door, my hands shaking as I reached for my coat. "Mom," Jeremy called after me, his voice softer now, as if he realized how harsh he sounded. "Don't take it like this. It's time." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The pain in my chest was too much to bear. I had spent my life building their dreams, making sure they had everything they needed, and now they were telling me to get out. I walked out the door, not bothering to look back. As I stepped into the cold, empty night, something inside me cracked. Something I had been holding on to for far too long. I didn't go far that night. I walked down the street, my feet carrying me aimlessly, my mind too clouded to focus. My chest was heavy with the weight of betrayal, and every step I took felt like a reminder of how I'd failed. Failed to protect myself from the people I had spent my entire life caring for. It wasn't just the words they'd said, or the way they'd dismissed me like I was nothing more than a burden. It was the finality of it. It was the coldness in Jeremy's eyes when he spoke. For hours I roamed. I didn't know where I was going or why I couldn't stop walking. The world felt so loud, yet I was invisible. I passed the same stores, the same faces, but none of them saw me. They just walked on, too busy with their own lives to notice the woman whose heart had just been shattered. At some point, I found myself sitting on a bench in the park. The cold wind blew across my face, and I couldn't even feel it. I stared at the ground, lost in my thoughts, when a man walked by. He was wearing a suit, probably on his way home from work, his briefcase clutched tightly in his hand. As he passed, he glanced at me, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. But it didn't last. He didn't stop, didn't offer a word of kindness, just kept walking. That was when it hit me. I had given my whole life to others. I had poured my soul into my family, into my job, into people who only saw me as something to be used. And when I no longer served a purpose to them, I was discarded like a piece of trash. My years of sacrifice had meant nothing. I had worked for the approval of others, only to realize that approval was a hollow thing, one that didn't even last when I needed it most. I sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of my realization slowly sinking in. And in that moment, a switch flipped inside me. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need to keep sacrificing my happiness for people who would never appreciate it. I was done. I stood up from the bench, wiping the tears from my face with a mixture of shame and resolve. I knew what I had to do. I needed to stop playing the victim, stop begging for scraps of attention or affection from those who had never truly cared for me. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I hadn't dared to call in years, the number of my old lawyer, the lawyer who had once handled a small inheritance for me years ago, the lawyer who knew all about the trust fund that I had never touched, the money I had never thought to claim, the fortune I had been unaware of. "Margaret Turner," I said, my voice steady despite the fire rising inside me. "I need to discuss something important. It's time to claim what's mine." I ended the call and felt a sense of clarity wash over me. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't thinking about what was best for others. I wasn't wondering how I could make things easier for them or more comfortable for them. I was thinking about what was best for me. I had sacrificed enough. I had given enough. The next morning, I didn't waste time. I knew I had to act fast before the old habits crept back in, before the guilt tried to crawl into my thoughts and make me second-guess myself. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to let Jeremy and Sarah treat me like I was disposable. I wasn't going to live out my years in the shadows of their expectations, constantly scrambling to prove my worth. The call from my lawyer came sooner than I expected. I had barely finished my coffee when my phone rang. "Margaret, it's done. The funds have been transferred and the trust documents are in order. You now have full access to the inheritance left by Ms. Catherine." Ms. Catherine. I'd forgotten all about her. She was an old employer, someone I worked for years ago. She had treated me with kindness, respect, even. Something I hadn't known from many others. I had worked for her for nearly a decade, cleaning her home, preparing meals, running errands, but I wasn't just her housekeeper. She had always made me feel like I mattered, like I had value. Unlike the others in my life, she never expected anything from me but honesty and loyalty, and I had given her that in full. When she passed away last year, I had received a letter from her lawyer. I didn't think much of it at the time. At my age, you don't expect to inherit anything but the memories of a life that's slowly slipping away. But Catherine had left me something more, something I never imagined. $8 million. I felt my heart race as the numbers echoed in my mind. 8 million. It wasn't just money. It was freedom. It was everything I needed to start over, to reclaim my life. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the old fool who had been stuck in a cycle of giving. I felt like someone who had been handed a key to the future. "Thank you," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "I'll come by to collect the documents later today." I hung up, and for a moment I sat there in stunned silence. I had spent so many years watching others take from me. My time, my energy, my love, and now I had something that was finally mine. Something I didn't have to share with anyone. A fortune. But as the adrenaline began to settle, the reality hit me. I had always been careful not to talk about money. I didn't want to appear greedy or selfish. But now I saw it for what it truly was. This money wasn't just about luxury or indulgence. It was a tool. It was a means to an end. It was a chance to do what I had never done before, to live for myself. The first step was clear. I had to leave. Leave the home where I had been treated like a servant. Leave the family that had discarded me. Leave everything that reminded me of how small they made me feel. And as I stood up from the kitchen table, I felt a surge of power. I was done being the fool. I was done being the one who was always there to clean up everyone else's mess. Now it was time for me to clean up my own life. It was time to make a change. I arrived at the lawyer's office that afternoon, my heart still pounding from the excitement of the morning. The money was real. It was all mine. As the lawyer handed me the official documents, I couldn't help but feel a wave of relief flood over me. For once in my life, I didn't need to answer to anyone. I didn't need to prove anything to Jeremy or Sarah or anyone else. I signed the papers without hesitation. My hands didn't tremble this time. This wasn't just a transaction, it was a declaration that I was taking control of my own future. The lawyer, a kind but professional man, offered a brief smile as I finished signing. "I'm glad to see you're taking this step, Margaret," he said. "Ms. Catherine was a remarkable woman. She trusted you with a lot, and now it's time for you to live the life you deserve." His words hit me harder than I expected. I had always thought of myself as just a worker, just someone who took care of things for other people. I had never imagined that I could be someone worthy of trust, of real wealth. But Catherine had seen something in me, something I had never acknowledged in myself. And now I was going to honor that trust. As I walked out of the lawyer's office, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The city felt different now. Bigger, brighter, more alive. The streets I had walked down 1,000 times suddenly seemed like a different world, a place where I no longer had to walk in the shadows. I made my way to the bank to transfer the money into an account in my own name, a small but important step in solidifying my freedom. I had been careful for so long, but now I was no longer hiding behind my old identity. I was no longer the mother who had given everything and received nothing. I was someone else entirely. Once the transaction was complete, I felt something shift within me. It wasn't just about the money, it was about the power I now held. The power to make choices, to say no, to walk away from people who didn't value me, to finally live the life I had sacrificed so much for, but had never truly lived. That evening, as I sat alone in my small apartment, empty, quiet, but with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going back. Not to Jeremy, not to Sarah, and certainly not to the life I had left behind. The next day, I started making calls. I wasn't sure where I would go or what I would do with all this money, but I knew I had to start fresh. I looked at luxury homes, started planning vacations, thought about what I wanted to experience in life, and then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in ages, a dream I had put on hold for years, to live in a place of peace, a place where no one could manipulate me or make me feel less than what I was. I found a house, and it was everything I had dreamed of. A quiet, beautiful home on the outskirts of town, surrounded by trees and space to breathe. It was mine, completely mine. No one to answer to, no one to criticize, no one to dismiss me. I didn't tell Jeremy. I didn't tell anyone. For the first time in years, I felt like I was finally making the right decisions for me. I was building the life I should have had all along. It wasn't long before I moved into my new home. The house was everything I had ever wanted and more. A sanctuary, a retreat from the world I had been a part of for so long. The moment I stepped inside, I knew I had made the right choice. The light poured through the large windows. The soft hum of nature outside filled the air, and the silence was a welcome relief from the chaos of my old life. I set about decorating the place, carefully choosing each piece, imagining a future where I could finally be at peace. I arranged furniture, framed photos of places I'd visited, and put up artwork I'd collected over the years, but never had the chance to truly appreciate. Each small change was a victory. Each decision was a reminder that I was no longer bound by the expectations of others. But as much as I tried to immerse myself in this new chapter, I knew it wasn't over. I couldn't just walk away from the life I'd left behind without facing the people who had discarded me, without showing them that I was more than just a punching bag for their disappointment. I wasn't just a fool anymore. I was someone who had learned the value of self-worth. It was 2 weeks after I had moved into my new home when I saw them, Jeremy and Sarah. I had received a call from my old neighborhood, a place I thought I'd left behind forever. They were standing at the front gate of my new house, both of them looking uncomfortable, unsure of how to approach me. Jeremy's face was pale, and Sarah stood beside him, her arms crossed defensively. The same look I had seen so many times before, guilt masked by arrogance, was written all over their faces. They had come for something. I could feel it in my bones. I stepped outside, slowly, purposefully, and stood at the top of the steps, looking down at them. For a moment, no one said anything. It felt like time had stopped. The wind blew through the trees, rustling the leaves, as if the earth itself was waiting to see what I would do next. Finally, it was Jeremy who spoke, his voice strained. "Mom, we've been talking. We've realized we were wrong about everything. We didn't understand how much you had done for us, how much you had sacrificed. We're sorry. We want you back." There it was. The apology I had waited years for. The one I had hoped for in the darkest moments. The one that had kept me clinging to the hope that things could be fixed. But as I stood there, staring down at my son. I realized something. The apology was hollow. It wasn't about me. It was about them, about their own guilt, their own shame for the way they had treated me. I took a deep breath, the kind that settled deep in your lungs and forced you to confront the truth. I wasn't the person who needed fixing anymore. I wasn't the one who had to make peace. I had made my peace. Jeremy, I said calmly, my voice steady but firm, I've heard your apology, but I don't need it. I don't need anything from you anymore. I'm not coming back. I'm not your fool anymore. I'm not here to clean up your mess. I'm here to live my life. Jeremy's eyes widened, the shock of my words hitting him like a slap. He opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand, silencing him. You've made it clear where you stand, and so have I. I gave you everything, Jeremy. My time, my love, my sacrifice. And you kicked me out the moment I couldn't serve your needs anymore. You don't get to come back into my life just because you've realized I have something you want now. You had a chance to appreciate me when I was there. You blew it. Sarah shifted uncomfortably, but she didn't speak. I could see the way her eyes darted back and forth, clearly calculating how to salvage the situation. But it was too late. The damage was done. This house, I continued, is mine. This life is mine, and I'm not going to let anyone take it from me, not you, not anyone. I took one last look at Jeremy, my heart no longer filled with the hurt that once defined our relationship. No, this time, I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just the calm certainty that I had made the right choice. They stood there speechless for a moment longer. I didn't feel the need to explain any further. The truth was clear now, and it had already been spoken. I turned and walked back into my new home, closing the door gently behind me. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. The days that followed felt different, lighter. Each moment in my new home was a reminder of what I had gained, of the freedom I had fought so hard to secure. But despite the sense of relief that came with my new life, the old world I had left behind didn't just disappear. Jeremy and Sarah had made it clear they weren't done with me. Their manipulations had shifted from guilt trips to legal threats. But they were playing a dangerous game, one that I wasn't interested in playing anymore. I had already made the first steps. I moved into my new house, started a fresh routine, and distanced myself from their calls. But the next move was inevitable. They were going to show up again. I didn't know when, but I knew they would. And just like clockwork, it happened. I had barely finished my morning coffee when I saw them standing outside my front gate, their faces a mixture of desperation and entitlement. Jeremy was in front, his wife Sarah standing stiffly behind him, arms crossed. They looked like two people who had come for something they felt entitled to but didn't know how to ask for. I didn't hesitate. I knew this was the moment. This was where I would either let them walk all over me once more, or I would finally, fully take control of the narrative. I stepped outside, walking with a calm that belied the storm brewing inside me. They didn't move as I approached, watching me, waiting for me to speak. For a moment, no one said anything, and I just stood there, looking at them. Finally, Jeremy spoke, his voice laced with that familiar false sweetness. Mom, we know you're upset, and we understand why. But we've been talking. We want to make things right. We can work this out. Just come back. We need you. The kids need you. His words hung in the air, his eyes wide with a kind of desperate hope, as if I was just going to fold, as if I was still the same woman who had spent decades waiting for his approval. But I wasn't that woman anymore. You've been talking? I repeated, my voice even, cold. It's funny, Jeremy. You didn't seem to have much to say when you kicked me out, when you tossed me aside like I was nothing more than dead weight. You didn't seem to have any problem making me feel like I was a burden. You wanted me out, and now that I'm gone, you want me back. Why? Because you need someone to clean up your mess again? Jeremy opened his mouth to argue, but I wasn't finished. "No," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm not going back. I'm not going to be your ATM anymore. I'm not going to give up my life for you, for your family, and for your problems. I gave you everything I had, Jeremy, and what did I get in return? Disrespect, betrayal. You took me for granted, and now you think you can just waltz back into my life and pretend like nothing happened?" I could see the anger flickering in his eyes, but I didn't flinch. This was my moment, and I wasn't backing down. "This house," I continued, "this life, I built it. Not you, not Sarah, me. And if you think I'm going to let you take it from me after everything I've given you, you're wrong. This is mine, not yours, not anymore." There was silence. I could see the shock on their faces, the realization that I wasn't the same person they'd left behind. Jeremy opened his mouth to say something, but I raised a hand, cutting him off. "I've already given you everything I had to give. I'm not going to let you take from me any more. You're not my responsibility. You never were. You made your choices, and now you'll have to live with them." For a moment, they just stood there staring at me. Their eyes flicked between each other, the realization slowly sinking in. They were out of options. They could no longer manipulate me, guilt-trip me, or use me. Then, in a move I never thought I would see, Sarah spoke. Her voice was sharp, full of venom. "You're selfish, Margaret. You always were. You're throwing away everything for some fleeting sense of independence. Don't think for a second that your grandkids won't remember this. They'll remember that you chose money over family. You'll die alone, with nothing." Her words cut, but I didn't let them affect me. Not anymore. "Maybe I'll die alone," I said quietly, "but at least I'll die with my dignity intact. At least I'll die knowing I didn't spend my last years giving everything to people who never once appreciated it." There was nothing left to say. They stood there, defeated, their expressions shifting between anger and regret. I could tell they didn't know how to handle the new me, the person who had finally drawn a line in the sand. Without another word, I turned and walked back inside my house, closing the door behind me. The sound of their retreating footsteps echoed through the quiet, but this time, I didn't care. The door was closed. The chapter was over. The days after the showdown felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I woke up each morning with a sense of purpose that had been missing for so long. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the constant pressure of being needed by everyone else. No more guilt. No more obligations. I spent my mornings with coffee and quiet reflection, looking out the large windows of my new home. The world seemed brighter now. The sun rose higher in the sky, and I watched as it bathed the trees and fields surrounding my property in a warm, golden light. It felt like I was finally living in a place where I could breathe, really breathe, without the weight of everyone else's expectations dragging me down. I used the space to fill my life with things I truly cared about. I had always loved painting, something I had put off for years, but now I had the time. I began to set up a little corner in the living room, with canvases, brushes, and paints scattered across the table. My heart swelled with something I hadn't felt in so long, a passion for something that was just for me. But the best part? No one to judge it. No one to tell me I was wasting my time. No one to tell me I wasn't good enough. I hired a landscape designer to help me turn the garden into something beautiful, a reflection of my new beginning. The flowers bloomed, the trees grew tall, and every time I stepped into the yard, I felt the promise of something new unfolding. It wasn't just the house or the possessions that mattered. It was the way I had begun to see myself. I wasn't just a caretaker anymore. I wasn't just someone who had spent her life giving and giving, only to be thrown away when I couldn't give any more. I was a woman who had finally claimed her right to live for herself. But then, one day, the unexpected happened. I was walking through the local art gallery when I bumped into an old acquaintance, a woman who had known me years ago, back when I was still caught up in the same routines, the same patterns of self-sacrifice. Her name was Chloe, and she used to work with me in the city. She had been a friend of sorts, someone I would see occasionally at social gatherings or events. Her expression was a mix of surprise and hesitation when she saw me. "Margaret?" she asked, taking a step toward me, her voice filled with an almost mocking tone. "Is that really you?" I nodded, not sure where this was going. I didn't have time for small talk or games anymore, especially not with people who had only ever seen me as an extension of what I could do for them. "I didn't expect to see you here," Chloe said, her gaze flicking over my attire and the surroundings. It wasn't a look of admiration. It was more like surprise, and if I was being honest, a hint of jealousy. "I see you've done well for yourself." I raised an eyebrow, watching her carefully. I could tell she was sizing me up, wondering if I had really changed or if this was just some fleeting moment in my life. "Looks can be deceiving," I replied coolly, meeting her gaze. "But yes, I'm doing well." Chloe smirked, taking a step closer to me. "I heard about what happened with your son," she said, lowering her voice, as if sharing some juicy gossip. "And how you, well, left them all behind." I stiffened. "I didn't leave anyone behind," I said firmly. "I simply stopped letting them take me for granted." She blinked, the smug expression on her face faltering for a split second. Chloe had always been the type to look down on people like me, someone who couldn't imagine a life beyond the little world we had been stuck in. But today, she seemed caught off guard by the strength in my words. "Jeremy and Sarah must be furious," Chloe mused, her voice tinged with something darker. "They probably don't even know how to handle it. You've really gone off the rails, haven't you? A woman like you, well, what's next? A fancy car? A trip around the world? You're not exactly the type to—" "Don't," I cut her off sharply. "Don't pretend you know anything about me." Chloe's eyes flashed with irritation, but I wasn't backing down. I wasn't the same person who had once let people like her step all over me. She wasn't going to shame me for living my life as I saw fit. "I've spent too long giving and sacrificing," I continued, my voice steady and unwavering. "And now I'm living for myself. I've earned it, and I don't need anyone's approval, least of all yours." For a moment, Chloe stood there stunned by the words I'd said. She opened her mouth as if to respond, but then thought better of it. She looked away, perhaps realizing she had no ground to stand on. I turned to walk away, feeling a sense of satisfaction that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about proving anything to Chloe or anyone else. It was about proving to myself that I was finally free. Free from judgment. Free from expectations. Free to do whatever the hell I wanted with my life. As I stepped out of the gallery and into the warm sunlight, I felt the weight of the past fall away completely. I had already made the choice to reclaim my life, and nothing or no one could take that from me now. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, and that was all that mattered. I woke up the next morning with a sense of serenity I hadn't felt in years. The world was quiet, the kind of silence that only comes when you've made peace with your decisions, when you finally let go of the weight you've been carrying for so long. I had everything I needed now: peace, independence, and a future that was entirely in my hands. I had walked away from the life that once defined me, the one that made me feel small and insignificant. But I wasn't small anymore. I wasn't invisible. The phone call came just after lunch. I wasn't expecting it, but I recognized the number immediately. It was Jeremy. I hesitated for a moment, then picked up. "Mom." His voice sounded strained, but there was something else beneath the anger, something deeper. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I was done listening to their apologies, their manipulations, but this time, it was different. He wasn't just asking for forgiveness. He was asking for something else. "Please," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I need your help. We've run into some serious financial issues. Sarah's been handling the bills, but things are tight. We're about to lose the house, Mom. If you could just—" I let him trail off. I already knew what he was asking for. It wasn't the first time Jeremy had come to me for help, but now I was no longer the desperate mother willing to bail him out. I wasn't the woman who would throw her life away for someone who saw me as a resource. I took a deep breath, my voice steady but firm. Jeremy, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to help you. Not this time. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him trying to collect himself, trying to understand that the woman he thought he could control was gone. Finally, he spoke again. Mom, you don't understand. I don't know what else to do. You've always been there for me. Why can't you be there now? I closed my eyes, the truth settling deep inside me. Because, Jeremy, I've already been there. I've been there for you your whole life. I've given everything I had, and you took it for granted. Now, I have to live for myself. I've spent my whole life sacrificing for you, and now I'm done. The words hung in the air, but there was no turning back. I could hear the frustration in his voice, the desperation. But this time, I wasn't swayed. I didn't need him to understand. I didn't need his approval. I'm sorry, but I'm not your safety net anymore, I said, my tone final. I could hear Jeremy's breath catch on the other end of the line. But there was no apology, no regret. Just a stunned silence that told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't angry because I had refused to help. He was angry because he realized I was no longer the woman who would jump to save him. I wasn't the old fool anymore. I'll call you later, he muttered, his voice flat. The line went dead before I could say anything else. I sat down on the couch, the weight of the conversation still sinking in, but there was no bitterness, no guilt, just a deep, calm sense of certainty. I had done the right thing. Later that week, I received a text from Sarah. It was short and blunt. We can't survive without your help. You've ruined everything. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She was trying to manipulate me, trying to pull me back into their world of guilt and obligation. But I had already made my choice. And this was the final test. The test to see if I would go back to the person I used to be, the one who put everyone's needs above my own. But I wasn't going to fail that test. Not this time. I spent the next few days in the quiet comfort of my home, focusing on what mattered to me. I painted, I walked through the garden, and I gave myself the space to heal. The world could keep spinning, but for the first time, I wasn't going to let it pull me into the same exhausting cycle of self-sacrifice. As the days went on, I realized something else. I had been right all along. They hadn't needed me. They had needed my money, my resources, my time. And when those things were no longer available to them, they had nothing to offer me in return. But I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval, and I didn't need anyone's pity. I had everything I needed right here, within myself. And with that realization, a quiet strength filled me. I had faced the ultimate test. I had walked away from the people I loved, from the life I had built around them. And I had survived. I was stronger now than I had ever been before. The phone didn't ring again after that. The messages stopped. And for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't oppressive. It was peaceful. The months passed, and with each day I felt the weight of my past slowly disappear. I had made my choice, and I had lived with the consequences. But the consequences weren't as heavy as I had once feared. They didn't haunt me the way I thought they would. In fact, I felt lighter, more alive, more myself. I had completely immersed myself in the life I had built. I traveled when I wanted to, spent time in the quiet beauty of my new home, and finally allowed myself the simple joy of doing things just because I wanted to. There were no obligations, no expectations, and no one to answer to. It was the first time I had truly felt free. One afternoon, I sat by the window, looking out over the garden. The flowers had bloomed beautifully, the trees were full of life, and the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow across everything. It was peaceful. It was perfect. I thought about the life I had left behind, The years of hard work, the sacrifices I made, the people I had loved, and yes, the pain of being discarded by my own son still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. I had learned to let go. The phone call came unexpectedly that evening. It was from the lawyer. I had almost forgotten about the paperwork I had started months ago, the legal process to reclaim what was rightfully mine, the house I had worked for, the inheritance from Ms. Catherine. It all felt like part of a different life, one that was now long behind me. But as the lawyer's voice came through the phone, I realized I was now closing the final chapter on that life. "The final papers have been processed," the lawyer said. "Everything is in order. The deed to the house, the trust fund, you own everything now. It's all yours." I sat back in my chair, listening to the words, letting them sink in. I had fought for this, and now I was free. The wealth, the property, the freedom. They were all a part of me now, no longer just a means to support others, no longer something I had to justify to anyone. This was my reward. I hadn't realized how much I had needed this final piece of closure, this final confirmation that my new life was mine to live, that I had truly moved on. I thanked the lawyer and ended the call, a smile creeping onto my face. For the first time, I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't waiting for guilt to knock on my door or for someone to tell me I had made the wrong decision. I had made the right decision, and I would continue making the right decisions for myself. Later that evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was short, blunt, and almost cold. "I know what you've done. I just wanted to let you know that I won't forget this. You'll regret cutting us off." It was from Jeremy. I didn't even flinch when I saw it. There was no anger in my heart anymore, no bitterness, just a quiet acceptance. I took a deep breath, deleted the message, and set my phone down. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Free from the demands of others, free from the guilt, free from the people who had always taken more than they were willing to give. I walked out into the garden and breathed in the fresh air, the sweet scent of the flowers filling my lungs. The sun had dipped below the horizon, but the stars were starting to come out, shining bright in the darkening sky. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. I had everything I needed right here, in this moment, and that was enough. As I stood there, watching the night fall around me, I realized that this was my life now, on my terms. The past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. The future was mine to create, and I was ready to live it. For the first time in years, I smiled, not because of anyone else, but because of me. I was finally living for myself, and I wasn't going to stop.